A cruel message in the sand confirms his fate, exiled forever in this desolate wasteland. He recalls being forcibly relocated from the castle, a move that signaled the end of his former life. The story flashes back 3 years to the Magreth Empire, where Prince Horus celebrated his 12th birthday. Even then, the young prince politely managed the castle staff gossiping about his future. The main event of the celebration was the magical affinity test, a rite of passage for royalty. The maids buzzed with excitement, certain the prince with the highest magical power would get a grand element. Horus, however, seemed far from confident, his expression filled with quiet apprehension. The maids' chatter shifted to hushed whispers, questioning the prince's true background. He chose to ignore their insensitive remarks, but the strained smile couldn't hide his discomfort. All eyes in the grand hall turned towards the stage as the prince prepared for the pivotal ceremony. With all eyes on him, the result of the pivotal test is finally announced. The verdict is sand, and the entire hall falls into a stunned, disapproving silence. The nobles' expressions immediately sour, their silent judgment filling the room. The young prince is utterly baffled, unable to comprehend the sudden wave of hostility. He's crushed by the weight of their collective scorn, labeling him a useless, single-element user. Even his own father turns away, declaring him a disgrace and effectively ending his life as a prince. The mocking whispers echo in his mind, branding him as completely worthless to the empire. The dark memory fades, replaced by the blinding sun of the present day. Now standing in the endless desert, he's forced to accept his new reality, exile. He wonders if a different element would have changed his fate, even as he senses the untapped power within his sand magic. He lets out a sharp breath, his despair hardening into steely resolve. Instead of giving up, he channels his anger into a new purpose, mastering this wasteland. With newfound determination, his first objective is clear: locate a source of water. He activates a spell, sending his senses spreading across the vast sandy expanse. Closing his eyes, he successfully pinpoints a faint water reaction deep beneath the dunes. Tapping into his unique abilities, he begins to command the very ground beneath his feet. He creates a massive ripple of sand, riding it like a wave across the desert. The sand propels him forward at incredible speed, turning the barren landscape into his personal highway. A wry smile spreads across his face as he realizes the irony of his situation. They meant to punish him, but instead, they've sent him to the one place he can truly thrive. Arriving at his destination, he unleashes a new spell, Sand Swirl. The magic creates a colossal vortex, drilling deep into the desert floor. He peers into the swirling abyss, waiting for the results of his powerful spell. His eyes light up as the ground begins to bubble, confirming his success. Precious water seeps up from below, forming a life-giving pool in the barren land. With his first need met, he immediately turns his attention to building a shelter. He commands the sand once more, this time to construct a magnificent sand castle. With a look of immense satisfaction, he watches his new home rise from the dunes. The sand rapidly solidifies, forming an intricate and towering fortress before his very eyes. He surveys his completed masterpiece, a palace fit for a king, and deems it more than good enough. Stepping inside, he realizes his magnificent fortress is just an empty, featureless shell. An idea strikes him. He can simply modify his spell to furnish the empty space. After all, a palace of this scale deserves equally grand decorations to match. He mentally blueprints the entire layout, from a grand lobby and guest rooms to a personal study and a slightly unnecessary throne room. With a calm, determined gaze, he fully embraces the start of his new life in this desert kingdom. But ruling a kingdom alone is lonely, so he crafts a massive golem to serve as his loyal protector. After a long day of creation, he finally collapses onto a newly made sand bed, exhausted. His mind immediately shifts to the next set of problems: securing food, plants, and even glass for his windows. Wasting no time, he sits up and activates his sand sense again, this time to scan for any useful resources nearby. But his search only reminds him of life's comforts, and he collapses in a moment of despair, desperately wanting some soft fur. His sand sense spreads far across the desert, reaching beyond his immediate vicinity. Suddenly, his senses pick up something unexpected, a flicker of life amidst the desolation. He pinpoints a collapsed individual, swarmed by multiple hostile creatures. Without a moment's hesitation, he propels himself across the dunes to investigate. A sense of urgency grips him. He knows he has to get there fast. He arrives to find a traveler and their mount surrounded by a pack of vicious desert goblins. The hooded figure is down, completely vulnerable as the monsters close in on them. The goblins screech, raising their crude weapons for the final decisive blow. Just in the nick of time, Horus soars in on a wave of sand, a shocking sight for the creatures below. With a furious cry, he unleashes a barrage of deadly sand spears upon the unsuspecting horde. The traveler's camel cries out, stunned by the sudden and chaotic turn of events. His magical spears tear through the goblin ranks, dispatching several in a single brutal instant. The remaining monsters are caught in the churning sand, unable to escape the prince's overwhelming power. Horus lands with a sense of relief, glad he managed to intervene before it was too late. His moment of calm is shattered as the surviving goblins turn their aggression towards him. He dismisses them with a grimace, viewing the creatures as nothing more than an irritating distraction. Deciding to end the fight decisively, he channels his magic for a much larger attack. He unleashes a powerful sandstorm, whipping the desert into a blinding, chaotic vortex. The goblins are tossed about like dolls, completely helpless against the raging magical tempest. But he's not finished yet, preparing another spell to ensure none of them escape. He unleashes a new spell, Sand Ring, sending concentric waves of force across the ground. The powerful rings of sand slam into the goblin horde, neutralizing them in a single sweeping motion. With the threat eliminated, he rushes over to the fallen traveler to check for injuries. Kneeling down, he carefully lifts the stranger's hood to see their face. The traveler's camel nudges him, making anxious noises for its unconscious master. He's stunned to find a beautiful young woman lying peacefully amidst the chaos. For a moment, the prince is completely captivated by her appearance. He quickly shakes himself out of his daze, realizing there are more important things to do. Deciding to act, he gently lifts the woman into his arms to carry her to safety. He summons his sand castle and reassures the terrified camel as he transports them both toward his new home. He lays the unconscious woman on a newly formed sand bed, her condition still fragile. A wave of concern washes over him. He knows she needs proper nutrition to recover. He calmly instructs the anxious camel to wait while he finds a solution. Once again, he activates his sand sense, scanning the vast desert for sustenance. His search extends far and wide, desperately seeking any sign of life-giving resources. Suddenly sensing a promising lead, he immediately sets off across the dunes to investigate. His magic reveals a dense cluster of biological signals, a potential source of food. He glides effortlessly across the sand, closing in on the location his senses pinpointed. His search leads him to a colony guarded by formidable giant soldier ants. But among them, he finds exactly what he was looking for: honeypot ants, a perfect source of sweet nectar. He intervenes with a sand spring spell, using the ground itself to fling the giant soldier ants away. The massive insects are sent flying, caught completely off guard by his sudden magical assault. Intimidated by his display of power, the aggressive soldier ants quickly retreat into the distance. He watches the aggressors flee, puzzled by the conflict, as one of the rescued ants cautiously approaches him. He's slightly taken aback as the honeypot ants gather around him, seemingly thanking him for his intervention. He's stunned when one of the ants offers him its nectar-filled abdomen, a clear gesture of thanks. He carefully holds the offering, observing the viscous liquid contained within a delicate, thin membrane. A sweet scent wafts from the sac, and he instantly recognizes it as the very thing he was looking for: ant honey. With the precious sustenance secured, he leads his new tiny allies back towards his desert fortress. His fortress looms in the distance, a testament to his power, as he returns with the key to the traveler's recovery. He gratefully waves goodbye to his new insect allies as he rushes back to the castle. Back in his fortress, he carefully feeds the sweet nectar to the unconscious woman. He sits vigil by her bedside, his resolve firm as he vows to see her through this. Days pass as he tends to her within the walls of his magnificent sand fortress. Finally, the young woman begins to stir, her eyes fluttering open in confusion. Her first waking words are a question of his well-being, but he's once again struck by her beauty. She expresses her immense gratitude, but he humbly brushes it off, simply glad she has recovered. Despite his kindness, she hesitates, steeling herself to ask for an even greater favor. With a deep breath, she begins to voice her difficult request. She looks at him with pleading eyes, asking if she can stay with him in his desert sanctuary. Her plea to stay in his fortress leaves the prince completely stunned. The sudden possibility of sharing his new life with someone else sinks in. Tears stream down her face as she desperately begs him for refuge. He physically jolts back, taken aback by the intensity of her desperation. Her offer to do anything catches his attention, his expression shifting to one of intense focus. He decides that before making any promises, he needs to hear her full story. Gratefully, the woman introduces herself as Isis and her loyal camel as Raku. He returns the introduction with a calm smile, telling her his name is Horus. Once they are settled inside, he gets straight to the point, asking why she collapsed in the desert. Her expression darkens as she reveals a familiar fate. She too was driven from her country. Isis is shocked to learn Horus shares her fate, while he admits his initial confusion. He realizes they are both outcasts, finding a strange kinship in their shared predicament. With a confident smile, he explains how his supposedly useless sand magic became a blessing in the desert. She's taken aback, recognizing that sand is actually an exceptionally rare magical attribute. Her gaze wanders around the room, beginning to truly appreciate the sand-based architecture. She walks down the vast hallway, stunned by the sheer scale and artistry of his fortress. Looking up, she admires the intricate details of the pillars and archways, all made of sand. She's left speechless, her mind struggling to grasp the immense power he wields. Turning to him, she asks in awe if he truly constructed this entire palace all by himself. She finally understands, asking if this incredible power was the very reason he was deemed useless and exiled. With a bitter click of his tongue, he confirms her shocking realization. Her shock quickly turns to righteous fury on his behalf. She recounts how he built this amazing castle and saved a stranger, finding his exile completely unjust. Her gaze hardens, a new resolve forming in her eyes. Acting on her newfound resolve, she grabs his hand, startling the prince. She passionately declares her new goal, for them to build the greatest kingdom together. The concept of building something together echoes in his mind, leaving him stunned. Suddenly flustered, she frantically tries to rephrase her proposal, insisting it's not what he thinks. Blushing furiously, she insists her only motive is to repay him, since she has nowhere else to go. He watches her flustered explanation with a gentle, amused smile, his decision made. He repeats her name, the weight of her proposal settling in his mind. He extends his hand, suggesting they form an alliance since they both have nowhere else to go. As he takes her hand to seal their pact, she watches with wide-eyed surprise. Now that their alliance is formed, he immediately pulls her along, leaving her to question his sudden urgency. In an instant, a massive wave of sand erupts from the ground at his command. Her excitement turns to sheer terror as the sand surfing experience leaves her dizzy and screaming. He remains unfazed by her panicked reaction, confidently steering them across the desert. He apologizes for the rough ride as they arrive at a beautiful hidden oasis. He casually explains his sand wave ability, which turns the entire desert into his personal expressway. While she's still in awe of the oasis, he's already planning their next move, gathering vital resources. He explains his magic works like sonar, using sand to transmit vibrations and locate objects with precision. With a flick of his wrist, he sends a tendril of sand up a palm tree to knock down a coconut. After securing fruit, he calmly announces their next task is hunting for meat and furs, leaving Isis momentarily stunned. With their camel Raku in tow, the two outcasts venture into the oasis to gather more supplies. They return to their magnificent sand fortress, a symbol of their growing dominion over the wasteland. Isis is astounded by their successful hunt, realizing his sand magic is a tool for every aspect of survival. He even uses his abilities for food preservation and storage, demonstrating a level of control she's never seen. Their new home now stands proudly beside a life-giving pool, the first step in building their kingdom. Horus surveys their work, admitting that a few cacti don't quite make for a lush paradise just yet. Isis confidently steps forward, surprising him by declaring she will handle the task of making the oasis flourish. He ponders her confident declaration, deciding to trust her and see what she can do. Isis reveals her own unique ability, casting a powerful growth acceleration spell. A palm tree erupts from the ground, growing at an impossible speed. The tree continues to expand, its trunk thickening in a matter of seconds. But her first attempt fails, as the magnificent tree withers back into a small sprout. Undeterred, she gracefully channels her magic once more, leaving Horus completely mesmerized by her power. Her spell succeeds, transforming the barren patch of sand into a thriving green oasis. She turns to him with a proud, gentle smile, declaring their new garden complete. Overcome with excitement, Horus's face lights up with pure admiration for her skill. He enthusiastically grabs her hands, praising her amazing feat as they celebrate their first joint victory. After their celebration, a flustered Isis asks if she can take a bath, catching Horus slightly off guard. She shyly finds a secluded spot by the water, still feeling a bit overwhelmed by the day's events. Horus waits respectfully by the castle entrance, suddenly self-conscious about his own hygiene. Leaning against a palm tree, Isis takes a moment to compose herself before freshening up. She reasons that after everything that's happened, a quick bath is perfectly understandable. Driven by pride, she is determined to present herself properly to the man who saved her life. Her loyal camel, Raku, watches the proceedings with a very knowing and mischievous grin. The camel's smug expression doesn't go unnoticed, causing a moment of humorous confusion. Seeking reassurance, Isis asks her camel if she smells bad, only to be met with a cheeky silence. She finally steps into the cool, clear water of the oasis, sending ripples across the surface. She relaxes in the cool water, letting out a sigh of pure bliss after the day's ordeal. Refreshed, she gracefully steps out of the life-giving oasis. While bathing, she consults her camel, pondering how she could ever repay Horus's kindness. Raku the camel seems to offer a silent, mischievous piece of advice in return. Her thoughts harden into a firm resolve. She will find a way to repay the massive debt she owes him. Meanwhile, Horus fights a losing battle against his own mind, trying to give her some privacy. An intrusive thought about her snaps his composure, leaving him visibly flustered. Their eyes meet in a moment of surprise, and she wonders if this shared vulnerability could deepen their bond. Trying to break the tension, she quickly brings up the honeypot ants, using them as a distraction. The full weight of the awkward situation finally hits her, leaving her speechless and blushing. Horus frantically insists he saw nothing, while Isis calmly notes the ants seemed panicked by their arrival. The vast, silent desert stretches before them, a blank canvas for their new life. She explains the ants simply showed up while she was bathing, causing the misunderstanding. Now composed, Horus admits he was just startled as one of the ants tries to communicate. The honeypot ants chirp excitedly, clearly trying to convey an urgent message. He admits with a wry smile that he can't understand their insect language. The ant gestures insistently, and Horus seems to grasp a part of its surprising request. Isis watches the exchange, concluding that the tiny creatures want them to follow. Horus weighs their options, deciding it's best to investigate if they plan to make this desert their home. With their decision made, the two outcasts agree to follow their new insect guides into the unknown. The ants lead them to a colossal earthen structure, which Horus identifies as their nest. Venturing inside, they find themselves in a vast cavern with an intricately carved ceiling. Their tiny guide gestures insistently, leading them deeper into the mysterious tunnels. He's stunned by the nest's immense scale, realizing it was completely hidden from his sand sense. A sudden thought strikes him as he begins to grasp the complexity of this underground society. They pass a larger wounded ant, a grim clue as to why they were summoned. The tunnel opens into a massive chamber, a grand hall befitting a royal court. The ant on his shoulder points forward with urgency, its message still unclear to the prince. Their journey culminates before a throne, where a regal figure acknowledges their presence. The being introduces herself as the Queen of the Honey Ants, the overseer of this hidden domain. The queen formally greets them, her voice echoing with regal authority. Horus and Isis are left speechless, realizing the desert holds far more intelligent life than they ever imagined. The queen reveals the reason for their summons, a territorial war with a hostile species known as the Iron Ants. She explains her plan to negotiate directly with the Iron Ant King, but she needs a powerful escort to ensure her safety. Horus listens intently, stroking his chin as he weighs the risks and rewards of this unexpected alliance. The queen formally requests his aid, asking him to use the same overwhelming power that drove off the Iron Ant soldiers before. He mulls over the proposal, recognizing that their lack of information about the area is a major weakness. With a confident smile, he agrees, stating that in this endless desert, mutual cooperation is the only way to survive. The Ant Queen is grateful for his swift acceptance, while Horus sees this as a perfect opportunity to establish a foothold. With the pact sealed, Horus and Isis set out across the dunes, escorting the queen on her dangerous diplomatic mission. He formalizes their alliance, proposing a transactional relationship, his combat magic for their honey. Eager to begin, he suggests they depart for the Iron Ant territory immediately. The queen gratefully accepts his terms, sealing their new pact with a nod. The queen is taken aback as they traverse the desert on one of Horus's signature sand waves. Both Isis and the queen marvel at his power, finding his sand magic beyond anything they could have imagined. He humbly dismisses their praise, insisting the arrangement is mutually beneficial for all parties. Their ant guide suddenly chirps with urgency, signaling they've reached their destination. In the distance, a colossal, mountain-like fortress emerges from the dunes, the Iron Ant Nest. Iron Ant sentries spot their dramatic arrival, screeching an alarm at the approaching sand wave. The guards immediately retreat into their fortress to warn of the powerful intruders. The queen remarks that his power is overwhelming, but Horus remains completely unfazed. Without waiting for a response, he channels his energy into a massive magic circle. He unleashes a great sand wave, a colossal tsunami of sand that dwarfs the Iron Ant guards. The tidal wave of magic effortlessly sweeps the panicked soldiers away from the entrance. Horus lands gracefully before the fortress gates, his path now completely clear. With the initial guards dispatched, he prepares to enter the enemy stronghold. But a new swarm of aggressive Iron Ants bursts from the entrance to confront them. He calmly counters with a sandbind spell, trapping the charging ants in their tracks. A single step is all it takes to completely neutralize one of the immobilized soldiers. He pauses thoughtfully, sensing there's more to this conflict than a simple territorial dispute. Tapping the sturdy walls, Horus wonders what material the Iron Ants use for construction. The queen explains they build their nests in land rich with a special material, iron sand. He places his hand on the wall, testing his magical affinity with this new element. A new idea forms. If he can control it, this iron sand could be an invaluable resource. The walls suddenly ripple and shift under his touch, startling his companions. Isis watches in awe as Horus realizes his power extends even to this metallic sand. A confident smile spreads across his face, knowing he can now easily neutralize the remaining soldiers. The Iron Ants are completely submerged and restrained by the very ground they stand on. They proceed down the now empty corridor, the sheer size of the nest leaving Isis speechless. A new, formidable ant appears, surprised to see the queen herself has come to their territory. The guard announces their arrival to the imposing Iron Ant King, who sits casually on his throne. The Honey Ant Queen bravely steps forward, declaring her intention to negotiate a truce. But the Iron Ant King coldly dismisses her plea, showing no interest in peaceful discussion. The queen is stunned by his refusal, believing there must be a way to resolve this without conflict. His response is chillingly clear as he grabs his weapon, his mind set on their utter destruction. Horus and Isis watch in shock as the king's murderous intent becomes terrifyingly obvious. The four-armed king rises to his full, intimidating height, ready to end the negotiations with force. His mind is consumed by a single dark purpose, leaving no room for reason. With a powerful leap, the king lunges through the air, aiming a decisive blow at the queen. But Horus calmly intervenes, effortlessly halting the king's ferocious attack with his sand magic. He warns the enraged king to stand down, shielding the Honey Ant Queen from the attack. He unleashes his new iron sand binding spell, trapping the king in midair. The Honey Ant Queen insists this violent outburst is completely unlike the king's usual demeanor. Sensing something is wrong, Horus activates his sand sense to investigate the king more closely. His senses reveal a shocking discovery. Another life form is residing inside the king's head. He declares his intention to remove the parasitic demon and restore the king to his senses. Isis asks if her life magic could be used to help deal with the parasitic entity. To assist in the delicate procedure, he summons a massive golem to restrain the powerful king. He explains that this operation requires incredible precision to remove the parasite without harming the host. The possessed king thrashes violently, testing the limits of the magical restraints holding him. With a sharp command, Horus orders his golem to restrain the rampaging king. The possessed king scoffs, underestimating the magical construct's power. He shatters the golem's arm with a single devastating blow, trying to break free. Isis and the queen are left in awe, shocked by the sheer power of Horus's creation. Horus remains unconcerned, calmly preparing to repair his construct on the fly. The golem's arm instantly regenerates, its iron sand form proving endlessly resilient. The Iron Ant King is stunned, realizing he's facing a foe that cannot be broken. Seizing the opportunity, Horus dashes forward to begin the delicate extraction. He instructs his golem to maintain its hold as he prepares a precise surgical spell. Using his iron sand magic, he forces the king's mouth open to access the parasite within. With immense concentration, he carefully begins the delicate extraction process. He successfully yanks the parasitic creature from the king's mouth with a triumphant cry. Without missing a beat, he turns to Isis to confirm the king's condition. Isis steps in, using her life magic to neutralize the fleeing parasite for good. She reassures everyone that while the king's energy is drained, he is safe and will recover. The Honey Ant Queen expresses her deep gratitude, which Horus humbly deflects. A moment later, the Iron Ant King begins to stir, finally coming to his senses. Horace calmly explains his actions as a simple matter of business between future trading partners. The now lucid king looks at the honey ant queen, confused but no longer hostile. He then turns and bows his head deeply to Isis, startling her with the sudden show of respect. The Iron Ant King mistakenly accuses Horace of being an invader, but the queen quickly clarifies he's their savior. The Honey Ant Queen prepares to explain the entire complicated situation to the bewildered king. He listens in disbelief as the truth of his possession and subsequent rescue is revealed. The full weight of his actions while possessed hits him, and he's horrified by his lack of control. Overcome with gratitude, the Iron Ant King formally thanks both the queen and Horace for their intervention. Horace tries to politely wave off the formal thanks, but the king is clearly insistent. The king declares his intention to make proper amends, despite the queen's attempts to downplay the situation. To move things along, Horace invites the ant royalty back to his fortress to formalize their new alliance. As they approach, the ant monarchs are blown away by the castle and oasis, correctly guessing his noble origins. Inside the grand hall, Horace clears his throat, ready to host the first diplomatic meeting in his new kingdom. The Honey Ant Queen marvels at the castle's grandeur, a testament to Horace's incredible magical power. The Iron Ant King then turns to Horace, ready to make a formal proposal of his own. Horace is suddenly caught off guard, finding the formal atmosphere a bit difficult to navigate. The king questions Horace's sudden hesitation, unsure what's causing the awkward pause. Changing the subject, Horace asks for their names, only to learn that neither the king nor the queen has one. He finds it strange to continue their alliance without proper names, feeling it creates too much distance. The two ant monarchs begin whispering to each other, leaving Horace to wonder what they're discussing. Having reached a decision, the Honey Ant Queen turns back to face Horace directly. They humbly request that he, their savior and new ally, be the one to bestow names upon them. After a moment of thought, he suggests the name Ain for the king and Mel for the queen, hoping they approve. The newly named monarchs, Ain and Mel, gratefully accept, with Ain making a bold declaration of lifelong loyalty. Horace is left completely bewildered as the two ant monarchs begin to glow with a mysterious light. A strange transformation begins, their insectoid forms starting to shift and change. In a flash of light, the two ants are reborn into stunning humanoid forms, standing before a magic circle. Mel looks up with a serene expression, her new form radiating an ethereal beauty. Horace and Isis can only stare in stunned silence, unable to process the incredible sight before them. Their shock turns to vocal disbelief as they struggle to comprehend the sudden transformation. Mel happily celebrates their successful change, while Ain looks on with cool confidence. The prince is snapped out of his stupor as the transformed pair make a shocking declaration of fealty. They bow their heads in reverence, addressing him not just as an ally, but as their new king. Their declaration echoes through the grand hall, solidifying his new, unexpected status. The two monarchs then ask to become his kin, a request that proves a bit too stimulating for the prince. Horace is completely overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events, reacting with a comically intense nosebleed. He tries to regain his composure, insisting his first priority is getting Mel some proper attire. While Isis panics over Mel's state of dress, Mel is more concerned about Horace's sudden affliction. Isis frantically offers her own clothes, while Mel apologizes for her unfamiliarity with human customs. Mel quickly improvises with a piece of cloth, asking if her makeshift outfit is acceptable. Deciding to solve the problem himself, Horace simply decides to conjure a new robe out of sand. Isis takes matters into her own hands, covering the prince's eyes to spare his fragile composure. Once the situation is calmed, Mel explains their transformation was foretold in ancient ant legends. Ain explains their human form is an unexpected but powerful result of the naming contract. He then passionately pledges his undying loyalty, considering it a great honor. Horace questions the logistics of their service, but Ain confidently tells him not to worry. He reveals they have relocated their entire colossal nest to sit beside the sand fortress. Horace then spots Mel outside by the oasis, already interacting with her ant subjects. Stunned by this development, Horace learns that as his kin, they are bound to stay by his side. Ain points out that Mel is already weaving clothes from leaves, a skill that surprises Horace. His thoughts are interrupted as Isis calls down to him from a castle balcony. She looks down with a hopeful expression, asking for his assistance with a new project. The two of them walk together outside the fortress, ready to begin their next endeavor. Isis points to a patch of sand, suggesting they turn the area into farmland. Horace agrees with her plan, but notes that sand is too porous to grow crops effectively. She looks at him with determination, explaining her plan to create proper soil for their new kingdom. With a supportive smile, he agrees to help her gather everything they need for the project. Overjoyed by his immediate support, her face lights up with a bright, enthusiastic smile. Their journey is interrupted by a massive lion-like monster, and Isis questions if it's hostile. Ain steps forward, confidently explaining that his new form came with a significant boost in strength. Planting his foot firmly in the sand, he declares that he will handle this threat himself. Horus expresses concern for his safety, but Ain confidently reassures his new king. He adds with a smirk that he also has his treasured spear, fully prepared for the coming battle. Ain faces the roaring beast head-on, his confidence unwavering as he prepares to strike. He scoffs at the creature, dismissing its power as completely insignificant compared to his own. With a powerful grunt, he lunges forward, unleashing a swift and decisive thrust with his spear. His attack connects with incredible force, sending the massive beast flying backward. Before the creature can recover, he closes the distance and lands another devastating blow. The lion-like monster cries out in its final moments before dissolving into nothingness. He stands victorious over the spot where the monster fell, the battle already concluded. A satisfied smirk crosses his face as he realizes his new form is even more powerful than he anticipated. Isis rushes over to congratulate him on the incredible feat, and he humbly accepts her praise. When questioned by Horus, Ain reveals he can't use spells, having simply infused his spear with raw magical energy. Mel's attention is suddenly drawn to a pair of birds circling above them. Isis is still reeling from Ain's display of power, while he humbly gives credit to his new lord. Mel identifies the birds as scavengers targeting their kill and decides to scare them off. She unleashes a brilliant flash of light, a dazzling display meant to frighten the birds away. Horus is stunned by the display, asking Mel if she just used light magic. She proudly confirms it, explaining that receiving a name from him unlocked this new power. Mel eagerly offers her rare light magic for his use, while Isis watches with a hint of envy. The prince is once again overwhelmed by the situation, much to Ain's weary exasperation. Ain reflects that Mel's complete innocence about her suggestive offer is what makes the situation so awkward. Isis, however, remains completely oblivious to the underlying tension, looking on in confusion. Isis suddenly points into the distance, having spotted something crucial for their survival. Her keen eyes have located a vast, wild field of sorghum, a rare sight in the barren desert. She explains that this isn't just any grain, it's a nutritious and valuable white sorghum, a stroke of incredible luck. The group immediately gets to work harvesting, with Ain enthusiastically gathering far more than his share. Horus is impressed by her botanical knowledge, admitting her expertise is a huge asset to their new kingdom. Overflowing with confidence, Isis happily accepts the compliment, ready to take charge of their agricultural efforts. They return to their magnificent fortress, which now stands as a beacon of civilization in the endless dunes. With the harvested materials in hand, Isis announces her first project, creating rich compost for their future farm. Horus readily assists, creating a perfect sand container for her project, which she gratefully accepts. Ain and Mel arrive shortly after, carrying a mountain of organic materials to help with the compost. Isis begins her project, combining shredded palm leaves, sorghum, and other organic matter into the sand container. She then casts a spell, using her life magic to rapidly accelerate the fermentation of the mixture. The process is complex, involving multiple stages of draining, mixing, and adding new materials to create the perfect soil. The group marvels at the final product, a rich, crumbly compost, with Mel expressing relief that the foul smell is gone. With the soil ready, Isis confidently hands the next stage of the project over to Horus. He steps up, using his sand magic to expertly shape the new compost into long, uniform rods. In an instant, he lays out the compost rods in perfect rows, creating a vast, ready-to-use farm plot. He looks to Isis for approval, and she confirms that his work is exactly what they need. Kneeling by their new field, Isis confidently declares that this humble plot will soon become a thriving farm. Horus looks on with pride, acknowledging that their new home is steadily improving thanks to everyone's combined efforts. He surveys their growing kingdom, a castle, an oasis, a farm, and a home for his new allies. With a heartfelt smile, he turns to thank everyone for making this possible. While his companions are honored to help, Ain already has their next big project in mind. He points out a strategic flaw, suggesting they build a watchtower for a better vantage point. They realize the surrounding dunes are higher than their fortress, leaving them exposed from the north and west. Horus agrees with the assessment, deciding a tower is a necessary addition for their security. Without a moment's hesitation, he begins to gather the very desert floor at his command. Placing his hands on a massive magic circle, he prepares to unleash another incredible feat of sand magic. In a breathtaking display, an immense and ornate watchtower erupts from the sand, dwarfing the fortress itself. His companions are left speechless by the new structure, and he eagerly suggests they explore their new vantage point. From the top of their new tower, they gaze out at the endless sea of sand. Isis and Horus share a quiet moment, admiring the beautiful, desolate landscape. But the prince's attention is suddenly drawn away from the view and towards his companion. He's once again captivated by Isis's profile as she enjoys the desert wind. Their peaceful moment is shattered by Ain, who spots Raku the camel performing a dangerous stunt on the railing. Horus sighs, realizing a quiet moment of accomplishment is too much to ask for with this chaotic group. Isis begins to scold her reckless camel, warning it to stop its dangerous antics. Suddenly, a massive bird swoops down from the sky, snatching the mischievous camel from the ledge. Both Horus and Isis cry out in pure shock and horror at the unexpected abduction. But Raku seems completely unfazed, letting out a cheerful cry as it's carried off into the sky. Horus cries out as he watches the massive bird carry Raku off into the distance. Without a second thought, he leaps from the tower, reassuring Isis that he'll handle it. He summons a sand wave, surfing across the desert in hot pursuit of the avian kidnapper. Skimming across the dunes, he expertly positions himself directly beneath the soaring bird. The giant bird squawks in surprise as Horus suddenly appears in the air beside it. To gain altitude, he launches himself skyward on a rapidly rising pillar of sand. Mid-air, he channels his magic, a complex spell circle materializing before him. He unleashes a devastating punch with a colossal fist made of sand, striking the bird directly. As the bird releases its grip, Horus effortlessly catches the cheering camel mid-fall. The bird's now empty talons are a testament to his swift and successful rescue mission. Isis watches in horror from the tower as Horus and her camel plummet towards the ground. To break their fall, he instantly conjures a massive sand slide, guiding them safely toward the desert floor. For extra protection, he wraps them both in a swirling sphere of sand just before impact. The camel clings to his arm with a goofy grin as Horus tells it to brace for the landing. Their protective sand bubble dissolves harmlessly back into the desert the moment they touch down. A single mysterious sphere is left behind, bouncing gently on the sand where they landed. The landing sends them tumbling, with Horus taking the brunt of the impact while the camel enjoys the ride. Lying on the ground, he lets out a sigh of relief, thankful that the chaotic rescue is finally over. His exhaustion turns to curiosity as he notices the ground around him is shimmering with a strange light. He realizes they've landed in a vast field of gold dust, nestled beside a massive, glittering cliff. His curiosity is piqued by a mysterious structure half buried in the golden sand. He turns his head, a thoughtful expression on his face as he takes in the strange sight. Upon closer inspection, he discovers a staircase leading down, wondering if it's the entrance to a labyrinth. Crouching at the entrance, he activates his sand sense to scan the underground structure for threats. He realizes with satisfaction that his magic can manipulate this gold dust, just as it did with the iron sand. Finding no immediate danger, he decides to venture inside, with his loyal camel eagerly agreeing. As a precaution, he first summons a sturdy golem to scout ahead and ensure their safety. The golem leads them into a vast, brilliantly lit corridor, revealing an ancient and magnificent hall. He marvels at the advanced construction, admitting he expected a rough cave, not a polished labyrinth. Admiring the ornate pillars, he gets the brilliant idea to use the gold dust to decorate their own castle. He considers the primary question, whether this place is a true labyrinth filled with monsters. A strange light from the ceiling illuminates the grand corridor, making him wonder about its source. The corridor opens into a vast chamber, dominated by a colossal golden statue at its center. He's stunned by the sheer scale of the hall and the glittering gold that covers every surface. As they explore, he finds it odd that there are no signs of any monsters, despite his initial suspicions. The absence of any life, human or otherwise, leads him to question the true nature of this place. He realizes this magnificent structure feels less like a dangerous labyrinth and more like a forgotten palace. His thoughts are interrupted as the golden statue's face shifts, revealing it's not an inanimate object. A disembodied voice explains that the being before them is Kened, a divine sphinx. Horus stumbles back in disbelief as the sphinx itself speaks, confirming it is very much alive. Horace stares in utter disbelief, struggling to process the talking statue. He quickly apologizes for the intrusion, but a new voice reassures him it's not a problem. The voice notes that unlike others blinded by gold, Horace is an interesting visitor. Trying to make a quick exit, Horace is stopped in his tracks when the voice forbids him from leaving. The Sphinx's companion insists he stay, promising a life of ease that only makes Horace more flustered. He firmly refuses, explaining that he has comrades waiting for him and cannot abandon them. The Sphinx itself finally intervenes, calling his desire to leave a sign of disrespect. Realizing he's trapped, Horace steels his resolve, preparing to fight his way out if necessary. Amused by his defiance, the Sphinx proposes a game as the golden floor begins to tremble. The game begins with a massive golden spike crashing down from the ceiling, forcing Horace to dodge the deadly attack. The voice explains the riddle. He must answer correctly before the golden spikes fall. Horace accepts the challenge, knowing that a correct answer will grant him special privileges. The mysterious voice begins to pose the complex riddle for him to solve. The riddle describes a paradoxical being, cruel yet compassionate, greedy yet giving, cowardly yet seeking eternity. The voice encourages him to think carefully, but Horace seems to have already found the answer. He confidently declares that the answer to the complex riddle is simply humans. The golden sphinx lets out a quiet, amused sound, its expression unreadable. Its quiet amusement erupts into booming laughter that echoes through the golden hall. Horace begins to doubt himself, but the voice confirms that his answer was indeed correct. The Sphinx explains it only laughed because he answered the profound riddle with such casual confidence. The Sphinx leans closer, curious as to why he answered the riddle with such speed. Horace explains that the riddle wasn't difficult, as it simply described the core of human nature. The voice questions why, if the answer was so simple, all previous challengers had failed. He nervously suggests that it wasn't a lack of knowledge that held them back. The voice elaborates that pride and social standing prevented others from admitting the unflattering truth about humanity. A reflection in the floor illustrates this point, and the voice praises Horace for his clear-sightedness. With the game concluded, Horace politely thanks his host and prepares to take his leave. But the entire golden chamber suddenly begins to shake and glow with an intense light. A hand suddenly appears before his eyes, shielding him from the blinding flash. When the light fades, he finds himself staring at a very unexpected and confusing sight. A stunning woman with striking features appears before him, looking down with a hint of disappointment. The prince is left utterly dumbfounded, unable to process the sudden and miraculous transformation. She casually confirms that she is the Sphinx, now standing before him in a new humanoid form. The Sphinx explains that as a divine being, changing her form is a trivial display of her power. She stretches luxuriously, admitting that she finds her new human body quite agreeable. The Sphinx then comments on a specific drawback of her new body, making a bold assumption about human preferences. Leaning in close, she questions his stunned silence and makes a very forward proposition. The prince is completely flustered by her directness, struggling to understand the reason for her transformation. The Sphinx pauses thoughtfully, a sudden understanding dawning on her face as she considers his confusion. He suddenly recalls her promise of a special privilege for solving the riddle, realizing with dread what it might be. The Sphinx confidently declares that the special privilege he earned is in fact her. Her casual demeanor only adds to his confusion as he struggles to find the right words. She closes the distance without warning, leaving the prince completely flustered by the sudden physical contact. She then clarifies her proposal. His reward for being allowed to leave is to take her with him. He frantically tries to decline, but she questions his reluctance to accept a divine beast as his kin. The prince desperately tries to wrap his head around the unbelievable proposition. She simplifies the deal, framing it as a simple contract that grants him unlimited access to the gold dust. She then points to the exit, explaining that the only way out is through a sealed door that only she can open. She reassures the flustered prince, confidently stating she will handle any problems that arise from their new arrangement. Her idea of a solution is another tight embrace, leaving Horace utterly defeated as his camel watches with a deadpan expression. Flustered by her proximity, Horace asks for some personal space, blaming the desert heat. The Sphinx reluctantly pulls back, though her expression shows a hint of disappointment. She then asks him for a proper name, feeling that Sphinx is too formal for their new arrangement. After a moment of thought, he suggests the name Phi, and she looks up as if struck by the choice. A sly smile crosses her lips as she quietly repeats her new name, clearly pleased with it. Her quiet approval suddenly erupts into a bout of unrestrained laughter, startling the prince. He stares in bewilderment, completely baffled by her sudden and dramatic change in mood. Composing herself, she simply remarks that he is quite an outrageous person, much to his confusion. She expertly changes the subject, pledging her service to him and leaving Horace to wonder at her motives. As they stand in the endless dunes, they agree on their new dynamic, establishing a bond between master and kin. Back at the fortress, Horace prepares to explain his unexpected return with a new companion. Isis questions him with concern, clutching a piece of the gold dust he brought back. He awkwardly prompts the mysterious woman to introduce herself to the rest of the group. Isis immediately grows suspicious, worried this beautiful stranger might be deceiving their prince. The woman introduces herself as Phi, a sphinx who has pledged herself as Horace's kin. Her grand declaration is met with blank, uncomprehending stares from the others. Their confusion quickly turns to collective shock as the reality of her words sinks in. Trying to restore order, Horace suggests they find Phi a room, while Ain marvels at his lord's new acquisition. But Phi shocks everyone by casually declaring she will be staying in Horace's room. The prince turns to see Isis trembling, clearly upset by the Sphinx's bold statement. Isis confronts the Sphinx, arguing that as kin, it's only natural for her to want to stay close. She points out, however, that since Phi has a female form, sharing a room with Horace would be highly improper. Mel chimes in, suggesting that as his kin, Phi should respect her new lord's wishes for privacy. As Mel pulls him away, Horace tries to de-escalate, telling Phi he will back down for now. Phi clarifies with a smirk that she is not backing down because he told her to, but on her own terms. Isis accepts the compromise with a seemingly sweet smile, agreeing to the new arrangement. Ain tries to solve the problem by offering Phi the room right next to his lord's, but Isis is shocked, revealing that the room Ain just offered is actually hers. Phi calmly points to the room on the other side, asking if that one will suffice instead. Isis faces her new rival, declaring they should get along, while Phi notes the sudden lack of formal address. Horace expresses relief, completely misreading the tense atmosphere between his companions. Night falls over the desert, bringing a temporary end to the day's chaos. Utterly spent, Horace reflects on the day's exhausting events as he lies in bed. He collapses onto his mattress, the day's efforts finally catching up to him. As he drifts off, his mind is already racing with plans for the kingdom's future. The night passes quickly, and as morning dawns, his bedroom door quietly opens. A mysterious figure silently enters his room and leans over his sleeping form. Stirring from his sleep, he senses an unexpected weight and opens his eyes in confusion. He's greeted by the sight of Phi sitting on his chest, looking down at him with a soft smile. The prince is sent into a panic, while Phi calmly notes that his rest has been interrupted. Their morning is interrupted as Isis bursts through the door, calling out Horace's name in concern. She confronts the Sphinx, demanding to know what she's doing, while Phi casually dismisses her. Phi offers a flimsy excuse, claiming she was simply too sleepy and entered the wrong room by mistake. Her blatant lie sends Isis into a state of pure, unadulterated rage. Her furious scream echoes from the fortress, a clear sign of the escalating rivalry. Later, while the women relax in the oasis, Phi complains of boredom and wishes she were with Horace. She boasts that she could be far more useful to her master, making a suggestive remark that irks Isis. Mel cleverly turns the tables, suggesting that if Phi is so capable, she can help with the farm work. Taking the challenge, Phi leaps from the water, suddenly eager to get to work and prove her worth. Isis watches her rival with a quiet, contemplative gaze, processing the morning's chaotic events. Meanwhile, Ain expresses his confidence that Horace and the others will be fine on their own. His calm is shattered by a sudden, violent explosion erupting in the distant desert. A massive wave of fire tears across the sand, heading directly for Horace and Ain. The prince quickly conjures a magic circle, preparing to defend against the fiery projectile. Ain calls out to his lord in concern, but Horace remains focused on the incoming threat. He summons a massive iron sand wall, attempting to block the devastating attack. The fiery blast smashes into his barrier, cracking the dense wall with incredible force. His defense shatters, and the prince is thrown back by the superheated explosion. He catches his breath on the ground, realizing just how close he came to disaster. But his relief is short-lived as another massive fireball hurtles directly toward him. With no time to recover, he summons a massive sand wave to shield himself from the second attack. Ain is stunned by the creature's unexpected power, realizing this is no ordinary monster. Horace urgently warns Ain that the beast's strength is far greater than they anticipated. He deduces that the creature, a sand turtle mole, has been consuming the region's quartz, amplifying its power. Despite the warning, Ain charges forward, striking the crystalline beast with his spear. The creature's back begins to glow, and Horus desperately prepares to erect more iron sand walls against the imminent blast. Its crystalline shell glows with blinding intensity as it gathers an immense amount of energy for its next attack. The sand turtle mole unleashes a devastating beam of concentrated light, tearing across the desert floor. The beam obliterates the landscape, forcing the two of them to sprint for their lives. They look back in terror, knowing that a direct hit from that beam would mean certain annihilation. The prince cries out in alarm, a sudden horrifying realization dawning on him. He understands in a flash that the quartz crystals on the beast's back amplified the fiery blast. As the creature prepares another attack, its crystalline shell begins to glow with immense power. Thinking fast, Horus devises a new plan, layering iron, gold, and quartz sand for a new defense. He conjures a massive makeshift mirror barrier, ready to turn the beast's power against it. With his new shield in place, he confidently prepares to reflect the incoming energy beam. The sand turtle mole unleashes its devastating attack, which hurtles directly into the reflective surface. The beam is sent flying back, striking the creature with the full force of its own power. Overwhelmed by the reflected blast, the crystalline monster collapses onto the sand, its attack backfiring completely. With a final cry, the defeated beast burrows deep into the desert floor, retreating from the battle. Horus casually finishes recounting the intense battle to the newly arrived women. He gestures to the massive crystalline shell, identifying the defeated sand turtle mole. Isis, Mel, and Phi can only stare in awe at the sheer size of the creature's remains. Ain, however, is more fascinated by the sparkling shell, asking if it's more than just a pretty rock. The prince identifies the material as quartz, explaining its potential for making glass. The mention of glass sparks a realization in both Isis and Phi, who understand its value. Horus seizes the opportunity, announcing their next project is to craft windows for the fortress. He quickly delegates tasks, assigning everyone a role in the new glass-making operation. To facilitate their work, a new modern-looking workshop has been erected beside the castle. With the raw materials prepared, Horus gives Phi the signal to begin melting the quartz. Phi unleashes a concentrated beam of light from her eyes, superheating the furnace. The prince watches anxiously, hoping their ambitious glass-making experiment succeeds. He breathes a sigh of relief as the quartz melts perfectly under the intense heat. But the process proves dangerous, as Horus recoils from the scorching temperature of the molten glass. Despite the minor setback, they successfully pour their first sheet of glass. Energized by their victory, the group eagerly prepares to produce more. Horus proudly inspects their handiwork, admiring the first clear glass window installed in the fortress. Soon, the entire fortress is adorned with beautiful glass panes, a testament to their teamwork. He turns to his companions with a grateful smile, thanking them for their incredible efforts. His companions reveal another creation, proudly announcing they also crafted a mirror from the materials. Isis admires her reflection in the massive new mirror, noting its usefulness for personal grooming. The entire group gathers on the grand staircase to admire their impressive new creation. The moment is broken as Mel panics, telling a flustered Horus that she's suddenly developed lumps on her chest. Ain chimes in with confusion, stating he has no such lumps, while Phi dryly remarks that he's mostly armor anyway. Phi calmly explains to a now relieved Mel that this is a perfectly normal aspect of her new body. Horus sighs in exasperation at the chaotic anatomy lesson, while Isis remains silently mortified. He then frantically tries to reassure Isis, insisting he saw absolutely nothing to spare her any embarrassment. Ain, ever oblivious, then innocently asks Isis if she also lacks these features, putting her on the spot. His genuine curiosity only makes the situation more awkward as he awaits her answer. He then observes that while Phi and Mel have these features, the implication hangs heavy in the air. Horus can only watch in horror as Ain's innocent observation puts Isis in an incredibly awkward position. Pushed to her limit, a flustered Isis furiously insists that his observation is incorrect. Her embarrassment quickly turns to anger as she grabs Ain's arm with a surprisingly strong grip. She teaches him a painful lesson, suggesting he focus his attention on less personal matters. Isis then defensively clarifies her position, blaming the others for setting an unfair standard. Horus watches the chaotic scene unfold, a small, amused smile playing on his lips. His attention is then drawn to the mirror, where his camel and golems are enjoying their new reflections. The entire group gathers before the mirror, and Horus reflects on how his lonely life has changed. A warm feeling spreads through him as he realizes his found family makes every day more exciting. The word family lingers in his mind, carrying a weight he's only just beginning to understand. The story shifts to a grand palace, where thoughts turn to a mysterious figure named Morgia. Meanwhile, a lone traveler trudges through an endless sea of sand, their journey marked by a single trail of footprints. The traveler plants their staff firmly in the sand, their determined stance betraying their exhaustion. Hidden beneath a heavy cloak, the traveler gasps for breath, the desert's heat taking its toll. She reveals herself to be Morgia Magrev, a woman with feline features who underestimated the desert's harshness. Clutching a nearly empty water skin, she realizes she was ill-prepared for the infamous Desert of Death. She regrets not forcing her brothers to reveal Horus's location, though she doubts they would have told her anyway. Using spatial magic, she conjures a single delicate flower from thin air. She gazes at the flower with a sorrowful expression, thinking of her dear brother, Horus. A wave of despair washes over her as she fears that finding him in this wasteland is an impossible task. Her despair turns to steely resolve as she looks toward the endless horizon. She vows never to return to the royal castle, refusing to give up on her quest. Her determination is so absolute that even if begged, she would continue her solitary journey. Her thoughts are interrupted by the surprising sight of 2 rabbits in the barren wasteland. She watches the small creatures hop away, a brief and unexpected sign of life. The sight gives her a moment of pause, her expression thoughtful as she considers her next move. Suddenly, a massive frog-like monster bursts from the sand, ambushing the lone traveler. Morgia cries out in alarm, realizing she's stumbled into a dangerous encounter. The creature's massive eye locks onto her, reflecting her image as it sizes up its prey. It strikes with a lightning-fast tongue, but Morgia expresses her annoyance as she dodges the attack. She counters with a powerful spell, using her spatial magic to warp the creature's attack. With a flick of her staff, she teleports the monster's tongue far away into the desert. But her victory is cut short as she stumbles back, a sudden wave of pain hitting her. She realizes with horror that the monster's saliva was poisonous, and it's now coursing through her body. Overcome by the potent toxin, she collapses into the sand, her journey coming to an abrupt end.